want to take you into a case that's a more recent case. The courtroom is a wrestling match for dueling research narratives on a floor that is profoundly uneven. The dominant story enjoys well-funded lawyers, can mobilize lots of evidence, and can relax on a bed of common sense shared by the judge and if there's a jury. The counter-narrative has to chip away gently at the dominant story, like these kids' lives are so miserable anyway, why would a good school matter? You have to chip away at it with legal logic, empirically demonstrated harm, need, and capacity, and you have to promise that the prescribed remedy will miraculously resolve the scalding, historic, and deep scars of injustice. Therein lies the fantasy of this work. Educational equities constitute what planning designers Horst Riddell and Melvin Weber call wicked problems. Entangled, crusty, reproductive, with many origins and mutations. But the courts want what these same authors call soluble problems. Those of you in education policy know the headache I'm talking about, I hope. Critical bifocality seeks to reveal the wickedness, but also shed light on the assemblage, that is, the fracture lines where possibility might breathe. So in 2016, I was asked to get involved in a class action lawsuit contending that poor children deserve more and enjoy less instructional time in school because of violence, lockdowns, interruptions, long-term subs, immigration raids, over-reliance on testing, illness. I was working with John Rogers and Nicole Mira at UCLA, and they were doing a statewide statistical analysis of the extent to which kids attending poor schools, in fact, had more disruptions on instructional time than kids attending wealthy school. And of course, they were able to demonstrate that students who attend extremely poor high schools lose on average 25 days a year, almost 14%, to in-school disruptions. Out of school, if there's violence in the community, they lock down the school, then their wealthier peers. So we were hired to conduct a qualitative assessment of the systematic disruptions of instructional time as experienced by students and teachers in low-income schools. We, Corey Green, Sonia Sanchez, and myself, we facilitated a set of focus groups with teachers and students from low-income schools in Oakland, LA, and San Francisco. And what we would do, and our focus was on instructional time. Here's my hope of what you're understanding. You can enter with a simple variable like instructional time, or student achievement data, or disciplinary data. And then it is our obligation to demonstrate the structures, the policies, and the histories that have produced these disparities. Does that make sense? Rather than accepting these disparities as in and of themselves, it's refusing the downstream analysis of just looking at the simple outcomes. So we set up these focus groups with teens and teachers. I'm mostly just going to talk about the teens. And we had a four-part method. First, we did a survey. We always do that because I like having a kind of quantitative skeleton against which to kind of hang the stories that we gather. Then we had young people draw maps. This is a method that Stanley Milgram and Jodelet developed in Paris, where they had people drawing where are the safe spaces in Paris in the 60s. We've been doing maps a lot, particularly in conditions of injustice where people have very different access to literacy or comfort. Talking about painful experiences, actually drawing creates a whole other setting. We've done it at Columbia University with law students. We've done it with these young people. I'm happy to send you, there's an article on the history of these identity maps. They're theoretically actually very, very rich. So we had young people develop maps, and the simple prompt was, draw what time feels like in your body in school. I know it sounds like a question you couldn't answer, but they did. And we got maps of a snail We got pictures of a clock whose hands wouldn't turn. We got one kid who drew a line down the middle and he wrote AP classes and all the kids' hands were like this, and low track classes and there were prison bars in front. And one young man, Carlos, he was Latino, gay president of his school. He drew a picture and he said, so this is the yellow brick road. Me and my friends are walking down the yellow brick road and you could see we're like walking and some of our friends fall off and some of our teachers fall off because of high stakes testing. And he said, I don't even know if anybody is behind the green curtain. You know who's behind the green curtain, but they don't, but he's still walking. And he said, so I don't even mind the walking. I don't really mind the tests, although I know it's making a lot of my friends and teachers upset. He said, but the thing you have to watch out for are the flying monkeys. You know when you're doing ethnography and you wait for the metaphor to land in your lap? And so flying monkeys became a metaphor for the precarity that young people are living in. And once he said that, another young woman said, I'm actually supposed to go to Princeton this summer to some summer program. My brother got shot. I don't know if I should go. Another little girl says, 2 of my brothers are in jail. And you know, they call me every morning and they say, do you have enough money? And they were so worried about me making it to this interview today. But it was told like a story of love, not a story of shame. And another young man said, you know, my dad was deported last month. And so this notion of precarity became a pretty dominant theme for us. And then when we interviewed the teachers, they talked about the incredible precarity of teaching in these schools, of mandates that were making them crazy, of expectations that were unrealistic. Economic, familial, political, and embodied and academic precarity saturated these young lives. Young people who were most vulnerable to material dislocations of family, home, school, nation, and relationships were also hyper vulnerable to education reform that was highly disruptive, that was removing their teachers, closing their schools, making them go through multiple examinations and tests and failures. And it was an astonishing recognition that the young people who lead the most precarious lives are exposed to the most, what is proudly called at Harvard Business School, disruptive innovations.